obviously I put on that one because it's making noise, and I put on that one, it seems to be making noise. I might have put on those two, which is sort of a bracha levatala. I'm not sure. I did three, so I assume one of those two. So we'll figure it out, and then we want to save energy. No, I'm not just going to waste. These electrons should do all this for nothing. Okay. So we had just started getting into the conversation where the Rebbe is explaining the four worlds. The basic idea is the Rebbe is explaining to us what Or Sevev is. Why is the Rebbe explaining what Or Sevev is? Why does the Rebbe want to explain to us what Or Sevev? In what context did he introduce that subject to us? Who remembers such a thing? Well, I'm just going to say hello to this Jew here who I don't recognize. Hello, how are you?
Hello.
What's your name?
Elon.
Elon. I'm sorry, I don't have another copy for you, but Nate's a pretty nice guy, and he'll probably share it with you. And if he doesn't, let us know, and we'll take care of him. Where are you from, Elon?
Texas.
Texas? Whoa. Rabbi Johnson? Oh, okay. Beautiful. Not easy times in Texas right now. No, who remembers?
Why is he
Why is the Rebbe explaining Or Sevev? Where did we run into Or Sevev in our Maamer such that the Rebbe wants to... Now, he's not explaining Or Sevev. Right now the Rebbe is explaining Or Mamale. But he's explaining I'm giving these names to them as very, very loose descriptions because the light is not finite, okay? But he's explaining the light that's relative to finite, called Mamale, in order to understand the light that is infinite, which is called Sevev. So why? We quoted the Alter Rebbe, we quoted the Balatanya, and even wrote it on the board, even though we're not sitting next to the board because we moved. Right? But imagine the board. Right? Kadiskafya Sitra Achri Stalakiku de Kuchabrichu Bechul Almin. The Frierdiker Rebbe. Today's the Frierdiker Rebbe's birthday also. Right? Not only is it the day that he was told that he would be able to leave exile in Kastrama, it's also his birthday. Today's the 145th birthday of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He should have a Shnas Hatzlocha. And that means that Mashiach should come, because that's what the Rebbe wants. So, the Rebbe quoted the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe in Tanya says, "Kadis kafya sitra achra istala kikra dekucha brichu b'chul almin." When you subdue the sitra achra, meaning when you overcome some negative subconscious desire that rises up into your conscious reality, and you become aware of it, and you push it away. When you do that, you bring about a revelation of the level of light that is found in all of the worlds equally, right? It goes out the light of God in all the worlds, but it doesn't, all the worlds is not the address where the light goes, it's the description of the light. The light that exists in all of the worlds equally goes out, and that light's called Sevev. And in order to explain that, the Rebbe is now explaining that there is a level of light called Mamale, which is different in every world, as we learned yesterday. And if you don't do a review, you'll forget it all. Okay? Just, that's not a threat. That's just the way the world works. Right? Why? Blame God. Right? So the Mamale is a level of light that's different in every world, and we talked about Mamale in terms of Koiches HaNefesh, powers of the soul. Our mashal for Mamale were the powers of the soul that are clothed in the body and express themselves in different ways. Right? Sight, the power of sight, which is a power of the soul that is clothed in your body and gives you the ability to see. The kli, the vessel that allows that power of sight to express itself, that vessel or those vessels are called eyes and optical nerves and optical center of the brain, the eyes. Why do your eyes see? Your eyes see because there's imbued in those eyes a light, a power, an energy of sight. Where does that come from? Your soul. And how do we know? Because when your soul leaves your body, your eyes stop seeing. And when your soul leaves your body, your hands stop moving. And when your soul leaves your body, not yours, right? When a soul leaves a body, what happens? all those things that are an expression of the vitality of the body leave. The existence of the body doesn't change. The body's still there, still weighs approximately the same, I assume, right? Might be a little heavier to carry because it doesn't carry itself, right? Like a sleeping child as opposed to an awake child. You'll, Bezrat Hashem, experience that many, many, many times in your life. Carrying sleeping children, they're very heavy because they're not carrying themselves in any way, shape, or form, right? Whereas when they're awake, they're sort of also carrying themselves, which doesn't make any sense because they weigh the same, but that's just the experience you'll have. Okay, so that dead person, I assume if you put him on a scale, he's still going to weigh this, 40 stone. I don't know, the Brits with their stupid, I don't know, whatever he should weigh, right? 80 kilos, okay? But what's not there? Vitality. Where's the vitality come from? His soul. And that was our mashal for mamale. Now, we said there's a difference between mamale, the light of God that fills the world, and the light and the soul that fills the body. The soul that fills the body is not responsible for the existence of the body, only the vitality of the body. Whereas the light of God that fills creation, all of reality, is the source of its existence and its continued vitality, both. Right? Were that light to recede, so then the world would cease to exist. It wouldn't blow up, it wouldn't become dust, it would just cease to exist as if it was never there. Poof, gone. Right? Why? Because what keeps the world in existence? The godly energy that's constantly surging into the world and giving the world its existence and its vitality. And that light is called Or Mamale. We brought yesterday two mashalim, two parables for Sovev in powers of the soul. Light that doesn't clothe itself in specific kalim is too powerful for that. So it expresses itself equally in all aspects of your being. What were those two powers of the soul that serve as a mashal for Or Sovev? Talked about it yesterday.
The two powers of things that he does.
Two powers of your soul that are a mashal for the notion of makif, something that surrounds as opposed to clothed. The powers of your soul that are a mashal, a parable, for the idea of godly light that's clothed in an object and gives that object its existence and continued vitality. The mashal for that was sight, intellect, speech, hearing, movement. All those powers of the soul are clothed in specific parts of the body, specific limbs of the body, and power those limbs of the body. So the power of sight isn't found here. Power of sight is found here. Power of intellect isn't found here. Power of intellect is found here. Power of smell isn't found here. It's found here. This is hearing. If the power of sight were to clothe itself here, you couldn't hear and you couldn't see. Because that's not what this kli is a kli for. Right? If you put coffee on a plate, it's not going to work. Okay? You need the proper kli. Okay. So that was a mashal for Or Mamale. What was our mashal for Or Sovev in powers of the soul? Powers of the soul, Ratzon and Tainu. Thank you very much. Will and pleasure. Will's the easiest because that's what we become aware of constantly. Will is in terms of the Nefesh Elokis, a superconscious power that you have no immediate conscious control over. You can't decide not to want something immediately. You want it. What do you want from it? If it's negative, so we'll call it a subconscious power. Okay, so that subconscious will that comes from the Nefesh Bahamis, and that subconscious will is for something that you deem to be unhealthy behavior. Okay, so you don't have to think about it, you don't have to speak about it, and you don't have to do it, but you can't not want it. Why? Well, because that's a part of you that you don't have immediate control over, because it's not conscious you, and you don't have immediate control over subconscious or superconscious you. You have control over conscious you. Tanya, Aleph, Beis, and Tanya. What's conscious you? Thought, speech, and action. That you have complete control over. Right? If you do something, you're responsible for the fact that that act happened, positively and negatively. Don't blame anybody else. Kids do. Right? He made me do it. No one makes you do anything. You do what you want. Right? Now, there might be certain coercive forces that are very hard to overcome, but I mean, you always have a choice not to do it. The choice might, chas v'sholem, be to die instead. Okay, Shir Beis Tammuz. Right? A lot of Jews died instead of doing what the Soviets wanted them to do. Right? Rav Lezer Nanis was a chassid who lived here in Yerushalayim the last 30 years of his life. Came here when he was 70. Passed away at 99 and 9 months. He spent 20 years in Siberia. He went to Temchei Tamimim Tafresh Ayin Gimel as a 16-year-old. Shvuas Tafresh Ayin Gimel. He turned 16 and he went to Yeshiva Temchei Tamimim in Lubavitch. He lived, if this rings a bell, so good. If not, so that's fine. As a bocher, he heard the Hemshech Tafresh Ayin Beis. Those are the Maamerim he heard as a 16-year-old from the Rebbe Rashab. He said that 90% of the students that he went to yeshiva with died in Stalin's camps. 90%. He said not one stopped keeping Shabbos and eating kosher food. Not one. That was what he said. I'd have no, papers to back it up. That's what he said. The 90%, that's easy. The back guys, that's unfortunately what happened. Right? 90% of the students he went to yeshiva with were put to death in Stalin's camps because they would not stop teaching children Torah and keeping Shabbos. Because you do whatever you want to do. Right? And if it ends up being a rather drastic end, okay, or you don't do whatever you don't want to do. So if you don't want to be Mechal Shabbos, so then you're not Mechal Shabbos. What's that? That's all conscious behavior. Wanting, it takes years to work on our subconscious state so that certain desires that we have might disappear over time. Right? And you can do that. Cigarette smokers 5 years later don't want a cigarette. Right? That happens. They want one for the first 2 weeks. They crave one for the first 2 weeks. After that, it's probably 6 months of a pretty intense desire for one. Every time they finish eating, they think about having a cigarette. Cigarette smokers hold their coffee with the cigarette here. It's like this cool thing. Feel like Clint Eastwood. So they miss that. They want that. But if they don't do that, then over time they will lose the desire for the cigarette. The addiction's gone. Now it's all just an emotional connection. The addiction, I think, is 2 weeks. The physical addiction, the emotional addiction can be months and months and months and months and months. 5 years later, that person has no desire for a cigarette and finds them as disgusting as the rest of us. Okay, good. So we can do that. So Ratzon is an expression of will, is an expression of a power of the soul that's not clothed in any particular part of the body. It's not part of conscious me, right? But powers all of the body equally. So the reason you move your hand, the reason you're speaking, the reason you're listening, the reason you're seeing, the reason you're thinking is because you want to. Right? Even thinking, which is the hardest one to control, obviously. But if you're thinking about a particular thought, then you don't want to, so stop thinking about it. Hard to do? Yes. Put something else in its place. Start singing a niggun. Start thinking about something else. Start saying over a page of Gemara that you memorized. Just force yourself to say it over, and that thought that you're thinking about will disappear. Is it going to come back? Of course it's going to come back. You know that. You've been around. Right? You push it away again. Can you do that? Yes. Hard? Ooh, wow. Not speaking it? That's easier. Not doing it? Of the three, that's the easiest. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's the least difficult. But that's all conscious me again, and that's mamala. Those are all mashalim for light that fills. Thought, speech, action. The mashal, the parable for the surrounding light, this is just review from yesterday, is ratzon, will, which isn't clothed in any part of the body and powers the whole body equally, and tainug was the second one we talked about, pleasure. Didn't spend much time talking about it, but that's also a makif. You can experience intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual pleasure, all sorts of different aspects of pleasure, right? What do you see with your eyes? One thing and one thing only, physical reality. That's what you do. You see physical reality. That's what eyes do. Can you see metaphysical reality with your eyes? No. Not here. Right? Can you imagine metaphysical reality? Yes. Not with your eyes. You do that in your brain. Your intellect does that. Can you talk about it, think about it, meditate about it? Yeah, but not with your eyes. Your eyes don't do that. They're rather useless. And if you force it to be your eyes, so you're going to turn it into silliness, because you'll turn it into Casper the Friendly Ghost, as opposed to what metaphysical reality really is. Right? Okay. Because we can't see it with physical eyes. Physical eyes don't see metaphysical stuff. They see physical stuff. That's just the way it works. You can blame God again. You can also thank him. Okay. So now we're just starting the discussion of the four worlds, and we got to Atzilus, and the last thing we saw, third line, is Atzilus is Bechinas Gilui Ahelim, the revelation of what was hidden. And what did we say that meant? We said that meant that all sorts of aspects of godly reality come into a state of revelation in Atzilus. What allows them to be revealed? Kalim, vessels, just like Amnon's book allowed us to see all the different colors that are hidden in the light before the light reflects off a particular vessel. All right? Okay, so now he's back in pink mode here. Right? It's also on my left, and I'm experiencing serious emotional difficulty dealing with that, but it's okay. I'll overcome it. Okay? So how Kalim work? We know how Kalim work. So what are the Kalim in Eilam Atzilus? What are they called? We know this. We talked about it. Spheres. 10 spheres. What are 10 spheres? 10 different aspects of God's personality, so to speak. Okay. Where were they before? Well, they were just consumed and concealed in infinite light, because in infinity you don't see specific reality. In the light out here, you don't see pink, red, blue, or yellow. It's all there. Just don't see it. Once it hits a kli, so then you see it. You see the pink, you want pink, there it is. You want blue, there it is. Here, oh my goodness gracious. Here. You'll overload. You might blow a fuse looking at all the different colors around us in this well-organized library. Okay. That's what Kalim do. And that's Atzilus. Eilam Atzilus is a godly world. We're going to bring Mashalim for the four worlds in a minute, but first we're going to go through the four worlds. Atzilus is a godly world. It's not a world of creation. It's a world of creator. What, so to speak, comes into being in Eilam Atzilus? The creator of the world. Because there's a level in Atzilus that is responsible for that event called Bria Yesh Miayin, the creation of something out of nothing. Creatio ex nihilo. That event happens where? Malchus of Atzilus, the lowest level in Atzilus, which is the repository for all of the light of Atzilus, and is that aspect of every world which expresses that world outside of itself, Malchus. You say it every Friday night, Malchus Peh, Torah Shabal Peh, your mouth. What does your mouth do? Your mouth reveals what's hidden inside of you to everybody else. That's why you should be careful with your mouth. You might reveal things you don't want to. Okay. You also hopefully can use it to reveal things you would like to. Right? What's dibur? Dibur is the revelation of thought to someone else. So Malchus is that aspect of every world that takes all of the light of that world, is the repository for all of the light, it's the receptacle for all of the light, and then from that world gives birth, so to speak, to a new state of reality. What does Malchus of Atzilus give birth to? Eilam Abriya, which we're going to see in a minute. What's Eilam Abriya? The first level of created reality. Not God, it's created. Atzilus isn't created. Atzilus is the Eibishter. Still a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's just the Kadosh Baruch Hu processing himself, so to speak, so that he can be the source of something finite, called an angel, which doesn't look finite to you and me because it's not physical. Okay, beside it, it's still a finite object. Right? It's not an object. well, it is. It's a metaphysical object. There's such a thing, right? It's a metaphysical being, right? Take up space? Yes, takes up metaphysical space. What does metaphysical space look like? I'm not sure. But the closest you and I can come to it is how your thoughts fill up your head. You have different thoughts in your head, different ideas in your head, and each of them has its own little compartment, sort of. Now, you can mix and match very easily with thoughts, much more easily than you can do with coffee cups. Okay, but still, there's thoughts that exist in your head, and the thought has a beginning and a middle and an end, and okay. So that's the closest you and I will come to experiencing anything metaphysical, because it's not taking up space per se. It's using up gray matter, filling up. But it doesn't exactly fill up either. Why? Well, because thought is is a very unique thing, and Chassidus talks about this. The more thoughts you have, the more you can put in your brain. The more coffee I have in the cup, the less coffee I can put in the cup. That's the nature of physical reality. What makes thoughts so unique? The more thoughts you have in your brain about a particular subject, the more ideas about that subject you can put in your brain. So a doctor can put all sorts of amazing information about medicine in his brain. You and I can't. Why not? Because our brain's empty of medical thoughts. So I don't have any room. Why? Because I'm empty. That's a funny thing to say. Well, that in thought, that's reasonable. Not in anything else. This cup's empty, so don't put in any coffee. There's no room. That's a ridiculous thing to say. The reason it has room is because it's empty. The reason I don't have any room in my head for nuclear physics is I don't know anything about nuclear physics. I could learn about nuclear physics, then I'd have lots and lots and lots of room in my head for nuclear physics, more and more and more and more and more, the more I learned about nuclear physics. And guess what? The more you learn about Chassidus, the more you have room for the ideas in your head, so you remember what Mamala and Sovev is. Because it starts to be the thoughts you have in your head. So you have more and more room for those kind of thoughts. So that's the closest you and I can come to sort of experiencing metaphysical feelings also. Where is it exactly? How does it work? Well, it's there. There are people with lots and lots of feelings also. Sometimes those feelings with people with lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of feelings don't have a lot of thought. They have a little more thought, maybe they have a little less feelings. Okay, so 4 worlds. And Atzilus, third line, Hu Bechinas Gilu Helam. That's where we got to yesterday. Vatzilus, the word Atzilus, the Rebbe's not going to give us 2 meanings of the word. One which we don't usually use in the translation, the other which we always use in the translation. Right? Atzilus is always translated as the world of emanation. Right? Okay, so the first translation doesn't say that. Atzilus milashon etzloi, the samuch, close to him. Right? Etzlo, achalti etzlo, that means I ate by him. I ate in his house. Right? Now, Jews say I ate by him. That's improper English, but that's Hebrew and Yiddish. That's why we say it. Achalti etzlo. Or, chabdessen by him. I ate by him. That's how you say it in Yiddish. So that's how Jews say it. Everybody else says I ate at his house, which is a reasonable thing. That's how you would say it in English. We just don't. Right? Okay. So etzlo means by him. Samuch, close to him. Etzlei, it's to him. It's close to him. It's v'chein perish atzilus, and this is the explanation that we generally use when we translate it. Miloshin, from the language of hatzola v'afrosha, something emanating out from something else. Hafrosha. I mean, I'm sorry for being physical about it, and it's sort of, but hafrasha is if you have an infection, what comes out of the infection is called a hafrasha. The doctor will ask, do you have a hafrasha? Is anything coming out of it? Is it, that means it's infected. Okay, that's hafrasha. Lifrosh means to leave, right? A politician that leaves the government is poresh mina memshalah. He left the government. Right, okay? That's the word hafrasha. So what's that? Emanation. The world of emanation. Datzilus. The ayin hey is im heyoto, even though it is. Okay, it's not amaretz, which is usually what it is. Im heyosei, even though it is bechinas oilam, it is a world, and the word world comes from the word helem, concealment. And by definition, when the light is clothed in a kli, something is revealed, but something is hidden. This reveals pink. What else is it doing? Concealing every other color that could theoretically be revealed in this light. Right? So what's it concealing? The infinite ability of light to express itself in color. What's it revealing? A specific finite expression of light called pink. True? That's what's happening with this thing. What's happening to all those other colors? Well, the physicists will tell us they're being absorbed in this object. What's happening to the pink of it? It's being reflected back to your eye. What's this doing? Absorbing all of the colors, so there's no color. What's this doing? Reflecting all of the colors, so there's no color. Right? This is revealing pink, but hiding everything else. That's what a kli does. So what does a kli hide? Infinite reality. What does it reveal? Finite reality. What do the kelim of Atzilus reveal? Different aspects of godly reality. What do they conceal? Infinite godliness. And I'll say this, I always feel bad saying this because so many of you heard it so many times, but some of you haven't, and it's one of the most important things you have to understand about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the extent that we can understand anything about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God is not infinite. Do not make that very, very serious mistake. God is not infinite. God's beyond infinite. Infinite reality is limited. It can't be expressed in finitude. God can. So when the philosopher asks, how does an infinite God create a finite world? He's just a moron. He's not a moron. He's just ignorant. Right? Because God's not infinite. Chassidus never asks, how can an infinite God create a finite world? Chassidus asks all the time, how can infinite light express itself in a finite form? That's a question Chassidus spends a great deal of time explaining to us. And what's the answer? The answer is enough is because God's beyond finite. So what can God allow for? What can God bring about? The synthesis of infinite and finite. Because if you're beyond both, you can allow them to exist in harmony, which is the world you live in. The world you live in is a world of finite reality, but hidden behind that finite is infinite reality. Right? And that can be expressed in space, the infinite amount of spaces that are between any two finite points in space. How many points in space are there between those two finite points in space? An infinite amount of points. How many numbers are there between the two finite numbers 1 and 1.1? An infinite amount of numbers. So this world is a dance of infinite and finite. It's just what don't we see? We don't see the infinite. As soon as we bring it into a state of revelation, it's now finite. 1.01. Oh, that's one of those numbers in there. Beseder, there it is. Look at it. It's right there. It's written on the page. Put that dot in between those two dots. Okay, that dot is now a finite dot. Still part of an infinite set, but it's a finite dot. You can't fill it up with the infinite amount of pencil spots, right? No matter how sharp you get your pencil. Right? You have an electric pencil sharpener. Can't get it sharp enough to get an infinite amount of points in between those two dots you made on the page, because you're now doing it in finitude, so it'll have a finite number of dots that fit. But conceptually, there's an infinite amount of space in there. So infinite godly light and finite reality can exist in harmony because there's a level of reality beyond both, beyond infinite and beyond finite, and that's a Kadosh Baruch Hu himself, which allows them to exist in harmony. Like you can take two north poles of a magnet you buy in the store and push them together because you're more powerful than the magnetic force of the magnets. You couldn't do that to a magnet in a lab in a university that could, pull cars in from the parking lot. You're not strong enough. But those two little magnets you buy in the store, the silver and red ones, that's not a problem because you're stronger. That aspect of God that's beyond infinite is called Atzmos, his essence. What's infinite, that's called or, light. What's finite, that's called kelim, vessels. What level of godliness is responsible? What name of God relates most to the infinite aspect of God? Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. What name of God relates most to the ability of God to reveal himself in finite? Elokim. That's why it says Bereshis bara Elokim. And Elokim, interesting enough, the word itself is plural. It's the source of plurality. Elokim. And it's even conjugated in Elokim Kadoshim. Doesn't mean holy gods. It means holy God. Seder, but it's written in plural. Because it's that aspect of God that's responsible for multiplicity, for plurality. So an olam, a world, is a place of concealment. What does it conceal? The infinite aspect of God. What does it reveal? Its particular nature, which is specific. So what does Elam Atzilus look like? I don't know. But there's 10 spheres up there. Right? What does Elam Abriya look like? I also don't know. But there's angels up there and very lofty souls up there. What does Elam Yitzira look like? I also don't know. But there's more angels up there and all sorts of other souls up there. Gan Eden Takta, and we talked about it yesterday. What does Elam Haza Gashmi look like? What does this world look like? Well, no problem. I know exactly what this world looks like. Right? Just look around. That's what it looks like. Some places are prettier, some places are uglier. Hopefully the first place a person lands isn't, North Jersey near the tunnels. Right? Because then he'll, have a pretty low opinion of what the world is. Right, but they say that's how bad life is in New York. The light at the end of the tunnel is New Jersey. But you can go to places where it's pretty nice. In Gashmi, it's just beyond belief how gorgeous and beautiful it is. That's a world. It's a world to look like. Aval. Even though it's a world. Therefore, it means it's a place of concealment, and that means it should theoretically conceal the infinite nature of God. It doesn't really. It does, but it doesn't. Aval b'chlalusa in general, hu b'chlal, it's generally understood as Eilam Hasein Seif. It's amongst the infinite worlds of godly reality, because Atzilus is a godly world, and that's why we completely differentiate between Atzilus on one hand and the other three worlds on the other, and that's why you notice when the Rebbe said, he talked about the four worlds, so he brought the verse right at the top of the page, and then he said, the light in Atzilus isn't like it is, and then he grouped the other three worlds together. So Atzilus is completely different, because it's a godly world, whereas the other worlds are created worlds. And again, we'll talk about a mashal that'll help us understand that once we finish reading about the worlds, which will be in a few lines. It's a godly world. Mashain Kain Bria, that's not the case of Elam Habriya, the world of creation. Shu Hascholas, that's the beginning of Hamatzias, the existence, Bebechinas, in the quality of Yesh Mi'ayin, the existence of something from nothing. What does that mean, something from nothing? Something created from a place that's not creation, created. Right? Yesh, created material, from ayin, from something that's not created, which of course is rather miraculous. Because how can one thing give birth to something else that's completely different than it? Right? Okay, that's the miracle of Bria Yesh Mi'ayin. And we'll see when we learn our Rebbe's Maamer that explains this chapter in Friedrich Rebbe's Maamer, we'll learn just a paragraph of it. The Rebbe is going to explain that ability comes from what's called Keich ha'atzmus, that aspect of a Kadosh Baruch Hu that's beyond any limitation whatsoever. It's not even limited by being infinite. Because again, infinite reality is limited. It's not finite, can't be finite. The Eibush is not limited in that way in any way, shape, or form. So, the one of the mashalim used in Chassidus, obviously it's not complete, but it still gives us a little taste of the idea. The idea of Bria Yesh Mi'ayin, of one thing giving birth to something else, is that when you water the ground, it doesn't grow ground. It grows an apple tree. Now, you know there's a seed of an apple tree in the ground. I get that. We know that. Okay. But it is interesting. Theoretically, if you water the ground, what should the ground grow? Ground. I mean, I don't understand. What do horses grow? Horses. What do cows grow? Cows. What do humans grow? Humans. What should ground grow? Ground. I mean, you water it. You want a mountain in your backyard? You want to ski in your backyard? Just keep watering it away. Water and while you'll end up with a nice big mountain, cover it with snow, and you can ski down into dinner every night. Okay. I don't know how happy your wife will be about that, but okay. That is how it works. There's a koyach tzemeach, there's a power of growth in the ground, and interesting enough, that power of growth doesn't grow itself, it grows something completely different. That's a mushal that Chassidus uses to help us have some inkling of the idea of Yesh Mi'ayin. Meaning the light of, because in all fairness, also in Yesh Mi'ayin, there's, so to speak, a seed. All the light of the world of Atzilus that comes into the repository of Malchus of Atzilus, which is like the ground, all of that light, what does it give birth to? Not itself, something else completely. All right? Which is interesting. The seed also in the ground, then the Eibishter made this happen so that you and I would have some inkling of how, real things work. The seed in the ground also, interesting enough, has to disintegrate before there's a tree. Right? Which is sort of fascinating how it all works. Right? Okay. But Elam of Bria is Yesh Mi'ayin. V'zeu, and this is why, now we're going back to our verse at the top of the page. Because in our verse we had 4 worlds, but the first one wasn't named. The first one was called Zeh Shmi V'lichveidi. This is my name and my glory. Right? Kol Nikra B'Shmi V'lichveidi. Barasiv, that was Elam Abriya. Yitzartiv, that was Elam Yitzira. Afasitiv, that was Elam Asiya. Those are the 3 worlds. They're there in the verse. That's how we know there are 4 worlds. But the first one is, it's not given a name. Why? Because those 2 aspects of reality, my name, my glory, hu miyuchad biyadayin, that's still one with me. Because Eilam Atzilus is still one with the Eibishter. It's a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's not a created world. It's the Creator. It's the Eibishter himself. It's God himself. Shekai, kai is an Aramaic word that means that's relevant to. Literally means it stands on it, but it's relevant to. Al oilam atzilus, the world of emanation. Shehu oilam hayichud v'iskalulus. It's a world of unity and incorporation. Meaning, even though there's 10 spheres, ultimately, those 10 spheres are all one and express God's oneness. God is so one that he can be 10 and still be one. Sha'or sham betachli sagilui, the light is there in a state of complete revelation. No concealment of godliness whatsoever. That's not similar at all. Lekameshu, like that which is ba'elamus in the world's bia, bria yitzirasiya. Those 3 worlds are completely different than Atzilus. Why? It's created reality. It's not the Eibishter. An angel isn't God. Don't bow down. Is the angel reveal God? Very, very powerfully. But is the angel God? No. And who'll be the first one to tell you that? The angel. He'll tell you that I'm created by a Kadosh Baruch Hu and I'm completely bottled to him. My whole existence is all about revealing him, not about revealing me. Meaning I'm a state of yesh, created reality, but I'm a state of yesh that's completely bottled. that's completely nullified. Not that he doesn't have a personality, he has a personality, he just uses that personality for Kadosh Baruch Hu's purposes and not his own. They all have personalities. Gavriel is Gevura. Right? Raphael is Refuah, Chesed. Michael has his things. Right? They have their personalities, but their personality is completely and totally dedicated to revealing godliness and not revealing self. That's called bittul. Bittul doesn't mean you don't have a personality, that you sit in a chair and drool all day. Bittul means that you use all of your energy, all of your intellectual, spiritual, emotional, physical energy for an agenda. The agenda being God's, not yours. That's called bittul. If I use it for me, that's called yesh. That's being a yesh. Right? Now I can use God for me. I can learn lots of Torah and become really smart and spend my life impressing people with how smart I am, and I just feel so good about being so smart and so, wow, aren't I great? Okay. Person coming close to God by learning Torah? No, he's coming farther and farther away from God the more Torah he learns, because he becomes more and more impressed with himself with another Blat Gemara and another Blat Gemara. Disaster. A person can even do that with Chassidus, which is really bizarre. Rabbi Steinsaltz said that a person who learns Gemara, learns Nigla, Gemara, Halacha, and becomes haughty, so he said, well, okay, it's like a pregnant woman. She's a little bigger than she should be, but you can explain why, because of the nature of learning Gemara, the way it works. Like that's how it works. Right? It's very intellectual, and you're talking about physical reality, and you can forget about God in there for a minute. Okay. Like a pregnant woman. Shouldn't be that way, but okay, you can explain it. That a person who learns Chassidus and becomes haughty from his knowledge of Chassidus, like a pregnant man. He's bigger than he should be, and there's absolutely no explanation whatsoever how in the world something like that can happen. Yes, Daniel?
Just a quick question. At what point did someone study Torah or Chassidus? At what point they basically stop being haughty and start being humble?
6 months, 8 days, 2 hours, and about 14 minutes. And if it hasn't happened by then, give up. Everybody's different, right? Some people walk in who are general, walk into the world of Torah, whether they're 3 or 23, it doesn't matter, with a certain edelkeit, and they're not so impressed with themselves. It's just not their personality. And other people walk in and they're just oozing self all over the place. And so that person's going to take a little longer to figure out how to overcome that difficulty that God has presented them with. Whereas the other person is a little more edel, who's got sort of a natural sense of what you and I might call humility. So that person will probably find it a little easier not to make this all about himself. Still has work to do, but it'll probably be a little easier. Because spiritual things work the same as everything else. I mean, some people have never played what the world calls football and the Americans call soccer, never played it before, and he comes to yeshiva and he goes across the street, and within 10 minutes he's figured out how to be almost as good as the Europeans. Not quite. Not the Dutch guys, but everybody else. Right? Okay. And some other guy will be on the field for the whole year he spends in Mayanot. He goes and plays soccer every Friday, and he's still like 4 hands. Just never quite figures it out. That works in Gashmias, right? Okay. Intellect, some will walk into a Gemara class in 3 weeks, they figure out how this whole thing works, and they then have to just keep doing it for a while to get the hang of it. Other people, it takes them twice as long, 3 times as long. Like anything else. Just keep working at it. What does God want? He wants the work. If he made it harder for me, it just means he wants me to work harder, that's all. What gives him pleasure? The work I'm doing. He's in every step of the way, right? Even after the mistakes, he's also there. One sort of muscle of a GPS. A friend of mine was sitting in a cab. He had never seen GPS before. He was in Sfas. Now, why anybody needed a GPS in Sfas, I don't know. But the cabbie had a GPS on in a cab in Sfas. This is 20 years ago. It just came out. What, the Garmin or something? What do they call it? Right. He had a little Garmin, right? The first one, right. Yeah, he had one of these in his cab, and he had never seen it. He said, wow, this is amazing. So he's watching from the back seat. He's watching this little screen, and it's saying turn right, turn left. So at one point it said turn right, or it might even not have said it. I don't know, but he was told to turn right, and he turned left. So what does it say? Recalculate. So he was very into that. I remember hearing he forbanged about this one night for about 2 hours. What didn't it say? You idiot, fool, moron! I told you to turn right, and you turned left. You idiot! Jump off a building. You're worthless. Didn't say that. What did it say? Recalculating. In order to get back to where I want to get, what do I now have to do? More things. I could have taken a right turn. Now I have to take a left, a left, a left, another left, and then a right. Okay, now, that's in Gashmias. What about in Ruchnis? That first left, what is it? It's a mitzvah. Coming closer to God. That second left, so I'm still coming closer to God. Third left, coming even closer to God. Fourth left, I'm back where I started, but I'm not, because I just did 4 amazing things to get back there. So I just related to God in a way that I wouldn't have had to relate to him if I hadn't been such a moron and made this mistake. So, okay, fine. So I'm a moron. Stay away from that. Don't call yourself a moron. You wouldn't call someone else that. Don't call yourself that. Just, okay, I made a mistake. If you don't think you're going to do that in life, Boker Tov, right? And go back to where you were and get, and so now you did 5 things that God wanted to make that one step. You would have done it in 1 step. Now you did 5. Wow. That's pretty good. Doesn't mean I want to make the mistake, because I do want to get somewhere. But all sorts of good things happen as a result of the mistake. The ability to fix the mistake. Ubabia Atzman, let's finish this quickly because I want to bring a mashal before my watch says it's 8:30. So the 3 lower worlds are not at all similar to Elam Atzilus, because that's a godly world. And what are they? Created worlds. Ubabia Atzman, and in the worlds of Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, Atzman themselves, Yesh Chiluki Madregas, there's different levels. Bagilui, and how much godliness is Bagilui Oris. How much godliness is revealed in each world. Kamesha Kosev, as it says. I mean, obviously there's different levels because there's 3 different worlds. Ba'elam Abriya, Elam Yitzira, Vasi, and what is it that distinguishes between one world and another? The level of godly revelation in that world, more or less. Amnam, however, Kol Zeh, all of this that we've said up until now, the last 10 lines, Uba Or is relative to the level of light, these differentiated levels, that's all relative to the level of light, Chabad, that comes, Lahachiyos Esa Elamis, to give vitality to the worlds, Bebechinas Mamale Kol Almin, by filling all the worlds, the light that fills, like sight filling your eye. Aval Ba'or, but regarding the light, Shulamayla Mishayches El Elamis, that it's beyond relevance to the details of the worlds. Vohu Bechinas, and that's a quality of light that is Or HaSoivev Kol Amin, the light that surrounds all the worlds. Our mashal relative to you and I was Ratzon and Tainug, will and pleasure. Shabbat, that it comes, that light reveals itself in an infinite way. It's too powerful to be clothed in any finite vessel. Bebechinas Soivev Umaki Fleilumus. Its vitality comes in some external residual way. Hare Meir B'chol Elamus B'Shava, that shines in all the worlds equally. Just like will. Where's will? Everywhere. Okay. Now, quickly, because we have 6 minutes and 42 seconds. Because we're always so precise when we stop. We're going to bring a mashal. We have a few props on the table. A mashal to help understand the difference in the kalim of the worlds, not the or. This mashal has nothing to do with the level of light in each world. It has to do with the level of the kalim, the vessels in the world, and how those vessels allow for the revelation of the light. Okay? So Elam Abriya, we'll start there. Elam Abriya, I'm going to use 2 examples which aren't on the table, even though we could use David's bottle there. But that's sort of halfway between Bria and Yetzirah. Elam Abriya, a Coke bottle. What's unique about a Coke bottle?
Shape.
Okay, shape. What else?
Clear.
Clear. You can see right through it. You know exactly what's in it, and you can appreciate the color and texture. You know, it's like the whatever's happening with the liquid in the bottle. You see it clearly as can be. The Kli does not. Now, the Coke will be the mushal for godly light, and the Kli will be the angel. The angel in Olam Abriya is translucent, and so he allows you to see the godly light that is vitalizing him and giving him existence and giving him energy. He lets you see that clearly, meaning he's completely batel. He's a yesh. There is a reality of the Coke bottle, but the Coke bottle is completely batel to the Coke in it. Because what does it want you to see? Coca-Cola. What does the bottle not want you to see? It's not interested in itself. Okay, Beseder, obviously someone was paid a lot of money to design the bottle, but the idea of the bottle is to see the drink inside. That's very different than a Sprite bottle. Not diet Sprite. Now they have clear Sprite bottles, these anti-Semites. Right? Ruins our mushal. The green Sprite bottle. What color is the liquid in there? Now you know, because you've poured in Sprite out of that thing, right? But if you never knew, you've never seen Sprite come out of a bottle, what might the color of that be? Green. It could be green, or it could be sort of yellowish, could be ginger ale in there, right? You're not sure exactly what's going to come out, right? If the Sprite doesn't come out clear, don't drink it, okay? It's not, right? I want to make sure we don't get mixed up there. The Sprite bottle reveals the existence of the Sprite in the bottle, doesn't hide it. You know there's Sprite in that bottle, and that bottle's all about the Sprite in it. But it has a lot more of its own personality, so to speak. Its own yeshus. Aren't I a nice shade of green? Right? So it doesn't let you see the light as clearly as the Coke bottle. Yeshus? What? I-ness, right? I as in I am. You know, a sense of its own being. Now, it's still batel, no pun intended, right? It's still batel, because what is it letting you see? What does it want you to see? I'm full of Sprite. Open me up, drink me, because I'm a great drink and I don't have caffeine. So if you want to, you have an upset stomach, don't drink the Coke, drink the Sprite. Both of them are really good for upset stomachs. Make them flat and drink them. Why? Because they're liquids that are full and syrupy, and what are they really good at? Absorbing gases, right? Because they hold that gas really well, don't they? Right? So put them down in your upset stomach. What will they absorb very well? All the gases that are giving you the upset stomach. So what will a doctor tell you to drink if you have an upset stomach? He might tell you to drink Coke, but that's a bad idea, because Coke has caffeine, and caffeine's a diuretic, so you don't want that. What do you want? Sprite. Flat Sprite. Shake it up, make it Sprite, drink it, guaranteed. It'll help your stomach feel a little better. You also need the liquids, right? But it'll help your stomach feel a little better. Why? Because it's going to absorb a lot of the gases that are making you feel not so good, right? And you might even make a good grapes, and then you're in good shape. The grapes of wrath, right? Yeah? Okay. So a Sprite bottle will be our mushal for Olam HaYetzirah. It reveals what's in it, but it colors it a little bit with its own being. It's not completely batel like the Coke bottle. Olam Hazeh Gashmi? I better be careful. Well, maybe not. Right? Because what don't you know when you look at this?
What's inside?
Anything in it? What does this cup say? I mean, this cup doesn't, but let's pretend it does. Aren't I a beautiful cup? Didn't the person who designed me have just an incredibly creative streak for color and beauty? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Look at that. Boring brown. Right? Okay. This cup reveals itself and hides what's in it. It's complete yesh. What's it lacking? Any bittel. All it's interested in is revealing itself when you look at it. I remember once talking about this in class, and someone said, yeah, but if you elevate yourself and look from a different perspective, you can see, that's Elam Hazeh. If you look from above, you see what's in the cup. You see the godliness in everything around. But if you look at it on its, like this, so you don't see, all you see is the physical object. Now, it happens to be, and at least we have one example of this, there are a lot of drinking utensils that have come into the world in the last 10 years more, meaning they become extremely common that everybody walks around with them in the last 10 or 15 years, things like that drinking utensil. So that thing, the blue one in the middle of the table, which is just like this, except it has a bigger sense of yeshus because it even covers up the top. So even if you elevate it, it doesn't want you to see what's inside, right? So that the oil mazah is getting darker and darker, but it's all right. We know that the inside every little piece of gashmias that we experience is godliness. But each world, interestingly enough, hides that more and more. So what does that produce? Two words that are very important, and you'll run across these two words and say this all the time. More bittul, yes, less yesh. More yesh, less bittul. In Olam Abriya, it's a world of yesh mi'ayin, but the yesh there is completely batel. You will not get the Molech to talk about himself no matter what you do. He's not interested in talking about himself. What does Rabbi Vichten love to say? Ask a person to talk about God, maybe they'll have 2 minutes of something to say. Ask them to talk about themselves, get a comfortable chair, they can talk forever. Maybe it should be the other way around. How long can you talk about God? Hours. Talk about yourself? Not interested. Maybe someone will talk about themselves if it will help another person come closer to God. But all in all, they're not really interested in doing it. Right? What question are you going to get asked in 15 years by people? How did you get through? As you're some, middle-aged religious person who looks very much at home in this thing called Judaism, and you're just like one of the guys, and then they find out you're a Baal Tshuva. Wow. You're one of those late beginner guys? Oh, how did you get through them? So you'll probably not be interested in talking about it because you're not really interested in talking about yourself. It might be that it's useful to talk about it simply because it could be helpful for this person because they're dealing with certain things in their process that you might be able to help by telling them about your process. Okay. But if not, it's not important. It doesn't matter. You're not hiding something. You're just not interested in talking about that. Why? Because that's you. Why do you want to talk about you for? You talk about you enough in there. You don't need to spill it all over the world. Right? Okay. That's called bittul. What's your agenda? Your agenda is the Eibishter's agenda. So now, in Olam Abriya, that's just an existential reality. That's what the malachim there, that's what the angels up there are all about. In Olam Yetzirah, you might get the angel to tell you his name. Maybe. Right? But not so much. What's he going to be interested in? Revealing godliness to you and to everybody else who's around. He's a Sprite bottle. He wants you to see what's inside. There's a little bit of yesh there, but he still wants you to see what's inside. Olam Hazeh looks like this. What about Olam Atzilus? Oh. So it took 2 years to come up with this mashal. Rabbi Levering and I were bringing about it for a long time. And at one point, I remember years ago, I don't remember exactly where it, how it happened, but we came up with a mashal for Olam Atzilus that works, and it's a really good mashal. What's Olam Atzilus? A cup made of ice. What's ice? H2O. What's in it? H2O. It's all the same. Just there's ice in a solid form, which is more, existent on some level. Specific, let's put it that way. And there's H2O in a solid form, and there's H2O in a liquid form. Now that's very amorphous. That'll just go anywhere, unless it's contained by the ice cup. The ice cup will contain the expression of the water in it. Oh, So what's that? That's Atzilus. Because the Kli in Atzilus is also Elokus. The Kli in Atzilus is not Yesh. It's not created reality. The Kli, the vessel in Atzilus is godly. Not godly, it's the Eibishter. It's all H2O. It's all the same. Just God in a more finite expression, God in a more infinite expression. The Or is the infinite expression of God. The Kli, the spheres, are the more finite, defined expression of God. Is it any less God? No. As a matter of fact, one of the most amazing and transcendent aspects of godly reality, and that's why we say Gvura is actually more impressive than Chesed. Gvura, which is din, restriction, is more impressive than Chesed and more sophisticated. So what does Gvura show? God's ability to take infinite light, push it into a finite form. Wow. You have to be pretty strong to do that. You have to be pretty big to do that. You have to be beyond infinite to do that, right? That's Gevura. That's that aspect of Elokus, which is Keli. And that's going to have a lot to do with why this world, with its incredibly powerful expression of self in the Kelim, is going to ultimately be the world where God is revealed most powerfully. Because when God wanted, and we'll see that when we finish the chapter, we're stopping now. When God created the world, up there in the essence of God, that place beyond infinite, when he said, I would like a dwelling place in the lower realms. For whatever reason, he had such a desire. Who knows? But he had a desire for a dwelling place in the lower realms. What's the first thing that happened? An explosion of unbelievably powerful light. That light underwent a process called tzimtzum, constriction. Right? What's that called? What did that leave, so to speak? It's called the halal reik, the empty space. It's not empty. What came into a revelation? Finitude. What was the first expression? The explosion of light, infinite. That light, so to speak, receded back into its source. What was left? So the words used are a halal reik, an empty space. Not empty. It's not empty. If it's empty of godliness, it doesn't exist. What does it mean, empty? What did God reveal by that act of that first act of what's called tzimtzum, restriction? He brought into reality the source of what ultimately will be finite. The ability of existence to express itself in finite. The first explosion is the ability of existence to express itself in infinite. The second act, so to speak, was the incredible tzimtzum called tzimtzum arishon, the first act of tzimtzum, the first act of constriction, which, so to speak, the light recedes back into its source, leaving the source of finite. The possibility of finite reality just came into being. It's not finite yet. Way up there. Okay. And then light emanates into that place. Okay. And all this whole incredible process called the creation of the world happens. And we learn all about it. Why? Why do we learn all about it? We learn all about it because Baruch Hashem, God gave it to us. That's why the original ideas in all of these things is called Kabbalah, right? What's Kabbalah? Well, Kabbalah means reception. Right, these are ideas that we couldn't possibly think of ourselves. Obviously, God gave them to us. We received these ideas, and now we're trying to understand them. They came from above below. There's no way you could figure this all out. You can figure out how to build a better mousetrap, but you can't figure out how godliness ended up being expressing itself in plastic and formica. How'd that happen? Okay, well, we know how that happened, and you should know how that happened. And you shouldn't believe in how that happened. You don't have to believe in that. You know how it happened. My car mechanic does not believe in how my car works. He knows how my car works. I believe in how my car works. Because I don't know how it works. But there's all sorts of aspects of godly reality that don't have to stay in the realm called Emunah. They can be brought down into the realm called intellect. Because you can learn about them in Chassidus. There's levels of godliness that you can't bring into your intellect. Leis machshav tfisa bechlal. No thought can comprehend them. That's talking about lofty levels of godliness that your intellect can't understand. Okay. So that'll be left. That's where your emunah comes. The emunah is a power of the soul that can connect to a level of godliness that intellect can't connect to, because it's a more powerful, more lofty power. Okay, so it can connect you to something that intellect can't connect you to. But what's your ultimate challenge? Is to bring as much of that down into intellect as you can, so you don't believe that God created the world. You can explain it to someone, sit them down and explain it to them very, very clearly how creation happened.
So, like, does that mean that someone who less understands intellectually how the world works and how God interacts with the world has to rely more on emunah and less on?
Well, he sort of forced himself to rely more on emunah. Right? Now that doesn't, but that level of emunah is, so to speak, misplaced, because it's emunah about something that he shouldn't really obviously, it's all based on emunah in the end, but really that's a level of reality that God challenges him to understand intellectually. Right? Hilchos Shabbos. Do I have emunah in Hilchos Shabbos, or do I know Hilchos Shabbos? I'm supposed to know Hilchos Shabbos, right? I mean, God said, especially the people sitting around this room, because they have XY chromosomes, and so they have this incredibly difficult mitzvah called Talmud Torah, which means every spare moment of our lives we're supposed to be sitting and learning Torah. Okay, so that means we're supposed to understand Hilchos Shabbos. I believe in Shabbos. Okay, good, but now I have to go learn it. And a woman also has to learn Hilchos Shabbos. For the women's learning is utilitarian. We can also sit and learn a Gemara in Ksubas that has nothing to do with anything we'll ever do. Okay, but Seder, I'm going to give my wife a Ksuva, but I mean, it's going to be, somewhere where she's taking care of it, she knows where it is, and I understand, and hopefully I will never need it. Right? Okay. Bab Metzia. I don't run a business. I don't have a cow. I have a car. If my car runs into your car, so then that's like my cow running into your cow, and all those halachas in Babakam actually apply. Okay, but there's all sorts of halachas that are fairly conceptual. Okay, and we have to learn those. Women don't have to learn those halachas, but women have to learn Chassidus. The Rebbe says they have to learn Chassidus. Why? Well, because they have to love God and fear God. And how can you love God and fear God if you don't learn Chassidus? Mm-hmm. If you don't have a sophisticated understanding of godliness, so what kind of relationship am I going to have with Him? What kind of relationship do I have with the political system of Gambia? Not very much, right? Why? Well, I don't really know an awful lot about the political system. I mean, is there a political system in Gambia? I'm not sure. I assume so. A slightly different thing? Let's have a conversation about 18th century French art. Okay, who would like to start? Anybody want to start? Izzy, do you know anything about 18th century French art? Not a darn thing. Okay. We're not. I'm not sure. It could be. I'm not sure. You could. Someone could sit here and pretend he's an expert and fool us all, right? There's people who, my father, Oliver Shalom, always used to say, you don't have to be right, you just have to be definite. Someone could be deaf. And he gives a whole lecture about 18th century French art, and the guy doesn't know a thing, but he convinced us, because we don't know anything either. Okay, so we're not going to have much of a discussion about 18th century French art. Okay, so what if I ask you to start talking about God? I sure hope you have something to say, and it's not like 18th century French art. Because if it is, you're going to have the same relationship with God that you have with 18th century French art. None. Right? I don't have a relationship with 18th century French art. It's not part of my life. If I can't think about God and He's not part of my conscious reality, I don't have much of a relation. Okay, I'll do what He wants, Beseder, I'll do what He wants, but I'll do it. And after I do this stuff, can you just leave me alone and let me get on with my life? I'll daven chakras and I'll put on your tefillin and I'll keep your Shabbos and I'll eat your kosher food, but can you just do, just stay out of my life, please, okay? I'll do it all, but just, can you please let me live my life? Okay, say that to your wife. Just do me a favor, I'll make some money and I'll come home and I'll say hello and I'll eat dinner with you, but just stay out of my life. I'm not, I don't. Give me my space. That's a great relationship. I think we want a relationship with God. He has to be in there in order to have a relationship. We got to put Him in there. So now we know about Mamale and Seve. If you don't yet know about it, review what we've learned and you'll know about it. If you don't review what we learned, you'll forget about it. Why? Because it's the same as anything else. If we learned about how to change a tire, you'd forget about it if you didn't do it a couple of times. Same thing. I mean, but this is a little more important. Unless you have a flat tire. Okay, it's late. Sorry. This is a nice room.